Hello, and welcome to Good News Rhode Island, the show about Rhode Island and the people and places and events that make Rhode Island a great place to live. We're constantly trying to listen to new voices, voices that don't get heard very often. And right now, all of us are longing to hear or understand more about the Muslim communities that make up our state, that are part of our lives. And we need to be more open. We need to hear. And we need to find out our similarities, and I'm sure there are many. So today, we are very pleased to welcome the chaplain, the Muslim chaplain at Brown University, Adrian Wood-Smith, and welcome. We're really glad to have you. It's taken a long time to get this together, but we're glad you're here. And I assumed that you were raised in England, and that is not true.
Well, I was the first 7 years of my life, but then in Minnesota.
And Minnesota is a long way from Boston, I'm sorry, and Providence. Most of us don't know a lot about Minnesota either. But what I want to ask you is, if you don't mind, I want to ask you how you came to become a Muslim. Mm-hmm. You were in a school. It was a public school, private school?
Private school.
Private school.
Private Christian school.
Christian school. Mm. Well, that makes it even more interesting.
Mm.
And so you began listening to other voices somehow, other faiths, because of things you heard from your teachers or from things that you heard from students. How did you make this slow decision to become different from your parents, I would say?
So it wasn't that, I felt like it wasn't that different from my parents. My mom was, she's a Christian, but not so committed in terms of church going, needing to be affiliated towards a particular church. Growing up, I was the one who really wanted to find a church and wanted to get baptized, and grew up in a Christian context. My father is into Eastern religions in general. So he was, I think, one of the main influences at first that got me thinking outside of Christianity. Gave me some books on Taoism and Hinduism. And then it was my freshman year of college when I was studying Arabic. I'd fallen in love with the language, just really wanted to understand the language and the people. And so I was studying Arabic at the time, and that exposed me to Islam on a deeper level, and it just really resonated with me.
So some of the patterns that you had as a Christian also are working now as a Muslim, I would assume. Certainly the cycles of prayer, the cycles of longing for God.
Yeah, there was, as I saw it, as we, as Muslims, see things theologically, we see that the message of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a completion of the prophetic message of the previous prophets and of the previous religion as we see them, just as how the Christian perspective is that it's a completion of the Judaic message. And so I saw it as a continuation and not really something completely different, just a continuation, a deepening. And in Islam, I found several things that I was really looking for in my religious practice before, but had never really found.
But changing from one faith to another must be almost like changing countries. in a way. Maybe because your father was also outside of the Christian box, as it were. It was easier for you. But it just seems to me it's a huge change, even with your friendships.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot to learn from my perspective, and there was a lot to teach as well. That lots of people had and continue to have questions, my family and friends. I didn't experience it as so different. I can remember the point, the day I converted actually was just, I had no plans really up till then of saying, oh, I'm going to convert to this faith, let me consider if I should convert or not. But I'd been looking into it for 2 months, had incorporated various parts of Islam into my religious practice. And after about 2 months of doing this and looking into things and thinking about things, I realized I had more invested in Islam than I had in Christianity. And I sat down thinking to myself after a Friday prayer service, well, I guess that makes me a Muslim. So then I reached out to the imam there, the preacher there, and officially gave the statement of faith, which makes one a Muslim.
What were the things that you felt more comfortable with in the Muslim faith than in Christianity? You don't have to be personal about it, but if you can tell me a little.
No. Yeah, there were several things and on several different levels. So first of all, the thing that got me thinking about it most was just a kind of spiritual pull. The first time I heard the Quran recited, the Muslim Holy Scripture, and the Muslim call to prayer, the first time I heard that, it seemed to touch something deep inside of me. I grew up, I was a classical pianist for 15 years, and so sounds in general really affect me and get close to my heart. So there was that kind of on a spiritual heart level, as well on an intellectual level, the whole concept of cycle of prophecy, that Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Noah, and then Jesus were all prophets in the same line of prophecy who came with the same basic message, and the completion was in the prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I felt in that theology a sense of being able to understand religious differences and world religions in the world today better than I could before. And then there was also other things such as a social pull as well. The first time I was in a community of Muslims, I felt like I felt like I could see light on their faces, and I felt like I want to be with these people. I want to spend time with them and be amongst them.
And what happened to your community that you had, your Christian community, your faith community from your school?
Yeah, so that was one thing that I actually didn't have, and partly caused me to think and to search, because growing up, I grew up in a Christian school, basically all the way through high school, and I also was a leader in my Presbyterian church as well. So I had those communities, but then once I got to college, I tried various Christian communities in college and around in the area, and never really felt like I fit in. And so I didn't really have a spiritual community at that point, and so found it then my first year of college in the Muslim community at Dartmouth.
When you are part of a faith, you have this whole context. It's a cultural context as well as a spiritual context, is it not?
Yes, I think a lot of people misunderstand that, both at least from about Islam. Islam is often seen as both a culture and a religion, and people both within and outside the faith, I think, make a lot of assumptions in terms of people outside the faith sometimes think that Islam is this monolithic thing, that Muslims are this monolithic thing, but it's over 1 billion people in the world. So you have all kinds of different cultures and different flavors of Islam that make up this religious community in the world. And as well, sometimes Muslims growing up grow up in Islam and have a hard time separating between culture and religion, and so there are certain parts that influence culture, but there's much room in Islam for different cultures, for an Islam that's American, an Islam that's African, an Islam that's Middle Eastern, these different ways.
I wonder if there would ever be some great congregation of everyone together and they could listen to each other. I mean, does
well,
that
there
happen?
is. I mean, it happens every year. It's happened since the beginning of Islam. Happens every year at the pilgrimage, the Hajj pilgrimage, where every Muslim who has the ability to do so, both financially and physically, is expected to make pilgrimage to Mecca, which is in current-day Saudi Arabia, at least once in their lifetime. And so this brings in, now it's, I think estimates are about 3 million people every year come in for that, and it brings in people from all over the world, all praying together, standing next to each other, performing the rites of prayer and other rites of the pilgrimage, and it's had a profound effect on many people for the past 1400 years. And one person who's very important to our history in America too, Malcolm X, that he really understood community, understood unity and diversity in a way in which he had never really before. Once he got to Mecca, once he made the pilgrimage, that really shifted his thinking on a lot of things.
Did you do that? Have you been?
I haven't been. So there are actually two different kinds of pilgrimages. There's the main pilgrimage, which happens at a specific time during the year, and then one can make a pilgrimage that's kind of it's less intensive and can be done at any point during the year. So I've done the less intensive pilgrimage.
And what were your feelings being there?
It was one of the most inspiring and spiritual experiences of my life. Once again, just feeling everyone is coming together in this space, people from all kinds of different cultures and areas of the world and levels of belief and practice, but all praying together and coming for the sole purpose just to reconnect with God. There's no other reason to go to those places. Well,
they're also reconnecting with each other in a way,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, right.
And are they speaking Arabic?
So because the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, spoke Arabic, and the Quran was revealed in Arabic, and we have an intense connection to the revealed word of the Quran, the book that we have today is exactly the same as was revealed 1400 years ago, and not a single word has been changed. And so we have this connection to the Arabic language, which creates for many Muslims a lingua franca. But those are the people who delve into Arabic and are able to pursue that education. Most Muslims don't have a strong grasp of the Arabic language, but pretty much in every Muslim community you'll find some people who speak Arabic, and therefore it is more or less a lingua franca amongst the community.
When you became a Muslim, you said you made the decision in your mind. Is there something like baptism, or is there some moment when someone, especially a young man, moves from one stage to another?
So in order to convert to Islam, one simply says the testimony of faith, which is the Arabic La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, which means that there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Once someone says that, then one's officially a Muslim. And so often there's a bit of ceremony involved. Almost you typically gather people together to witness that event, and it's often after the weekly Friday services. And so that's when I did it as well. But it's very simple actually. That's all that one has to do.
It's also communal, obviously. And after you said that, then you began studying. Is that right?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And so for those of us that are not Muslim, who is Muhammad?
Muhammad, peace and prayers be upon him, and I say that we ideally say it after the names of all the messengers. We say peace and prayers be upon them, because this is what is taught by us from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and in the Quran it says send prayers upon the Prophet when you mention him, and so Muhammad, peace and prayers be upon him, was a man who was born 1400 years ago in what is now Mecca in Saudi Arabia. It was Mecca at the time as well, but it wasn't Saudi Arabia, the country we know it now. And it was a pagan society. People were worshipping idols. There was a lot of injustice, and he was known for the first 40 years of his life as someone who stood up against injustice, wasn't going to stand with and be okay with any oppression in his society. Was known. He had many epithets, many honorable epithets. One was Al-Amin in Arabic, which means the most trustworthy one. And so he was known as an example of virtue amongst his community. But he always struggled growing up the first 40 years of his life, feeling like he didn't have a sense of how he could connect with his Creator. That there was something that was lacking in his life, some connection that wasn't there, and so he spent an intense period of meditation for 6 months, just spending time in solitude in a cave outside of Mecca, trying to contemplate life and connect with his Creator. And then, as the narration goes, after this 6-month intense period, the angel Gabriel comes to him with revelation. And he's someone who never learned to read or write, and yet the first revelation that comes to him is read. And he says, I don't know what to read. Read. I don't know what to read. Read a third time, and then suddenly the revelation comes down. Read in the name of your Lord, the Lord who created humankind from a blood clot. And so immediately this revelation comes down, and then for the next 23 years of his life, bit by bit, he receives the revelation of the Quran and proclaims it to the people around him because of the vested interest that people had in Mecca, the injustices that were perpetrated there, that he was calling against. He was forced to go outside of Mecca and had to seek refuge in Medina, which is north of Mecca, and from there the Islamic civilization really started, as he became the political leader of that community in Medina, and then reconciled himself with the other people around him who accepted Islam, and this is how the community formed, basically, with this man known for 40 years of his life, not claiming anything for himself, not trying to push himself out in any way, but just being known as the most ethical person around, suddenly receives this revelation from a higher plane, and proclaims this revelation, and this revelation makes a difference in the lives of the people around him, and now a difference in the whole story of humanity.
Do you think it's because he worked for justice and people saw a difference in their own lives? How did it spread so quickly?
That was much of it. That first of all, people knew him, and they trusted him for the most part. The people who didn't accept the message and who oppressed the early Muslims were the people who typically had a vested interest and felt very threatened by what justice would mean for their society, what removal of idolatry would mean for their society, because their whole system of trade and marketing was based on people having these stone and wooden idols that they'd come worship in Mecca and that kind of thing. And so one of the reasons why it spread so quickly was because he had already been established as an ethical leader, and people had no reason to doubt him and to mistrust him before that. And also the strength of the culture there, that there was a real sense of family and honor there, and so with this as people came to see that this revelation was something that was good for society, then they brought other people in with them as well, and it was really something that resonated with the Arab peoples, the Arab tribes at the time as well.
That must be a wonderful study, just to learn that as alone.
Right.
And so you came to a life decision, and you came to Brown as a graduated student. You have a master's degree, a doctorate?
I don't actually. I've done graduate study in Syria in Arabic, but we currently don't have many institutions of higher learning for the Islamic tradition from a practicing perspective in this country, and so my knowledge and training has mainly come through work experience, and then through studying one-on-one with traditionally trained Islamic scholars.
So it's very much like Muhammad himself.
As I see it, yes, yeah. I mean, one of my main teachers, in order to meet with him on a yearly basis, I have to go into the middle of the desert in Mauritania, and so much of that context has been preserved.
That's quite a demand.
Simple, inspiring way. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I have so many questions. Allah, the one, the only eternal God, creator.
Mm-hmm.
In Christianity, we use those same terms. Are they different?
As we believe it, this is all. It's all terms for one God, who's the God and the Creator, who's acknowledged in many different traditions. In Islam, we do tend to use one word specifically for God, which is Allah. Which is the Arabic word for God, most basically. It's not a Muslim word for God. The Christians and the Jews who speak Arabic, they use that word to refer to God as well. And as we understand it, the word Allah has other spiritual significance as well, in terms of when we breathe, we call upon that name, Allah, Allah, and our heart beats that name as we understand it. This name is the name we use most often to refer to God, but in the Islamic tradition, Allah has many other names as well, many other qualities and attributes. And so some of those attributes are the loving, the most widely merciful, the most deeply merciful. And then in addition to words that we normally associate as concepts themselves, such as the truth is a name of Allah. The peace is a name of God. The justice is a name of God. And so even as we understand it, even people who don't ascribe to a belief in God or in a higher power like that, often they have pursuits of justice or truth or peace. And as we believe it, that is a pursuit of God as well, as we understand it in our tradition, with those being names of God.
And so you're saying, but I think people here need to hear that the name Allah is used by different faiths.
Of course, yeah.
Because it is Arabic.
Right. The different,
and so
faith communities
when
Arabic,
some people, well, anyway, I won't go into that, but somehow when it's used as a negative statement, in a negative statement, they're actually talking about their own faith as well.
As we understand
Yes.
it, right.
All right.
Yeah.
So
it's like the French Dieu. It's just a translation of God.
Okay. Prayer and fasting, a constant relationship with God, a constant agreement with God, love of truth, love of humanity. All these things are part of Islam. Is that not true?
That's right. As we understand it, as we learn from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there's a famous account in which the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was sitting with his companions, and the angel Gabriel actually came up to him in human form and asked him a series of questions which show the structure as we kind of understand our faith and the different dimensions of the faith. That the angel Gabriel asked the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, tell me about bodily submission. And so submission of the body, the worship of the body, comes down to 5 pillars basically, some of which you mentioned: the testimony of faith, regular prayer, giving almsgiving once a year, fasting, and making the pilgrimage. Those are the 5 pillars in terms of our actions, our bodily state. Then he said, tell me about faith, or your state of mind. And in those there are 6 pillars. We believe we're always called to have a state of mind, 6 things that we always keep in mind. Keep in mind God, His angels, His scriptures, His messengers, the last day, and predetermination.
What is the last day and what is predetermination?
The last day is the day on which we're all called to account for our deeds. We believe that this life is a life in which we're not, people can choose to do evil in this world and won't receive the retribution necessarily for it in this world, but they will receive recompense for it in the next life, as well as those people who do good. Often they're purified, and we learn patience by not completely receiving the reward of good in this life, but we will receive the complete reward in the next life. And then you asked about predetermination, which is the idea that God has, or the belief that God has complete power, complete knowledge, and He knows everything that will happen from the beginning to the end of time, and yet we also have free will. And so that's something that's reconciled not at the intellectual level, but the heart level, which comes down to the third and final dimension of the faith, which is spirituality. It's the heart level, which is defined by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as to worship God as if you see Him. If you don't see Him, He sees you. And so this is Islam, basically. This is the faith, both a sense of obligations to do certain physical actions regularly, also to have a certain mindset, and also to work on our heart, work on our spirit in that way.
So prayer is a regular part of your day, is that right? And the calls to prayer come to you how? Because you live in a culture that doesn't have minarets or whatever.
Yeah. So if you're in a majority, sorry, those are my prayer beads that just dropped there. If you're in a majority Muslim country, you'll often hear the call to prayer.
It's very beautiful.
Which is that was one of the things that really drew me, really touched me at the beginning of my journey. And you'll hear that if you're in a majority Muslim country. That's something that's recommended in a Muslim community to let people know that the prayer is about to start. But the way that we tell the prayer times, I mean, well, today it's often on an app on the phone, but really
well,
it's from the movement.
Useful.
It's from the movement of the sun. So the first prayer is before dawn. The last prayer is when all the light has gone out of the sky. There's a prayer at sunset. So it's all based on the movement of the sun.
And there's a prayer in the middle of the night.
Once all the light has gone from the sky.
And it's very beautiful to hear that in the middle of the night. So intellect and faith and science, is that a struggle in the Muslim faith as it is in Christianity?
For the most part, no. We might find some examples of certain Muslim scientists maybe grappling with some issues in history, but for the most part, it's not a conflict. As we believe even to look at the Quran literally and to believe it as the literal word of God, it alludes to many scientific facts of creation as well.
Good answer. I'm wondering about some of the other beliefs that we hear, and we have almost no time at all, but I'm wondering about women and how women are treated, how your understanding of women, how the Muslim understanding of women must change with these different cultures that you're talking about.
Yeah, so first of all, the one mistake that a lot of people come to in trying to understand Islam is by both Muslims and non-Muslims, is just by reading the Quran and getting their own interpretations and their own ideas from what they're reading. But the Quran really presents spiritual revelation, presents a framework that we believe fits for many different cultures in many different societies, and so there's lots of room for different cultural perspectives on things, and so the interactions and expectations of different genders in society are things that are very much determined by culture, and so there's not really one Islamic way to be a man or to be a woman, but in general there are many rights and responsibilities that each one has, and so many parts of the religion are things that your average American might not be able to relate to, but are often forms of empowerment that many Muslim women feel.
We have so much to learn, and I really appreciate you talking. We are out of time completely. I just have to say, I really hope that there's a way that Christians and Jews and Muslims can get together and pray and dance and sing, and maybe you're going to be one of the people that helps to start it, because you have some foot in both areas.
Well, it's happening. It just needs to continue to happen.
Yes. Well, may it happen. Thank you so much for coming, Adrian Woodsmith, and we welcome you as well to continue this discussion by looking online to define Muslim beliefs and also to talk with your neighbors. Thank you for watching Good News. We're sure there's good news around the corner, and all of us of every faith will help to make it.